been waiting for this one for a while. Welcome to meet my friend or friend, with Daddy Porter, and I am Daddy Porter. So I'm just going to jump in right here. My guest here is well known to people in the homebrewing industry. Um, so I met him. I'm at. Let's just tell the story. So I was at HomebrewCon in Minneapolis. I went there pretty much by myself, but I knew our homebrew crew was going to be there. So I went by myself, but I, drove by myself, or I'm sorry, went by myself, but I drove with two friends. Get up to HomebrewCon. They were a couple, so they did their different things. I had I think it was a Thursday. I was, milling around, and I don't know, it just ended up being a short night. So I just went back to the hotel room, but it didn't feel right. Like, it was one of those nights where it was a short night, but you're like, man, I wish I had something to do. So settle down, get a shower and all this, and I just hear like this loud noise coming from down the hallway, and it was a couple rooms down. And it just persisted. And I was like, oh, these people must be, they must be HomebrewCon folks having a good old time. It's cool. You know what I mean? Like, so whatever. And I was just like, damn, that's pretty cool. So it just kept going and going. And I was like, why are you going to sit here when they're having like this epic time, like two doors down? So like, I was like, let's see. So I put a shirt on and I peek out the door and I look to the left and there's a security guard there. And I just look at him and he looks at me and he's like, hey, are you with that party there? And I was like, yeah, I am with that party. so I was like, yeah, I am with that party. So can you go in there and tell these guys to calm down? Keep it low, because again, we know you guys are here for the brew thing and we're all, we're not trying to. So I'm like, okay, I'll go in. So I go, make a right and I go down, and the next door that clearly wasn't it. And then the door after that was it. So I knock. And the guys open up and they're like, hey, what's going on? I'm like, hi, what's going on? And I just walk in and they were just like, hey, what's going on? Blah, blah, blah. They just thought I was there. And I was like, I'm just, so I look like down, you walk into a hotel room and then you can see like down, all I see is Marshall there standing on a bed. Like, I want to say like it felt like he was like preaching to his masses almost. And it was great because I walk in and I'm like, what's going on? Who is this? And he's like, look, man, without, I think I came in at the beginning or the middle. He's like, without you guys, we wouldn't have anything at Brülosophy. We are our family. You guys support me. Like, he was just going on about the love that he had for the people in the room, and how much they've helped him, how much we've helped each other. It was just like this. I walk into this big like community, like love fest. It was it was funny. So then like the guys that were at the door, because you couldn't get any more. Like, I just got in the door and that was as far as you can get. Imagine, friends, if any of you been to a bottle share with me in a hotel room, you know what I'm talking about. Everybody's clogged in. Everybody's got a beer. People are like hugging, and I can't even think about this post COVID. But anyway, so Marsha was there, and I don't know. Again, you got up, you were talking to your friends, and then you stepped down, and everybody was drinking, and you came by, and you're like, hey man, I never met you before. Nice to meet you. I mean, you were told to us how that I was crashing your party, and it was fun as hell. So, long story short, I still didn't know who you were, brother. I really didn't. I had a really good time. It was cool. So then on the way home, my friend Dan was like, hey, we're going over what we're doing. And I was like, hey, and I told him the story, and he's like, whoa, wait, you met Marshall from Brülosophy? And I was like, yeah, whatever. And he's like, no way, man, that's excellent. Like, where did that happen? And how did you? And I'm like, I stumbled into somebody's party. So then when I got home, Marshall, was actually when I really realized and found out who you were, because I wasn't a home brewer. I'm still not a home brewer. Actually, we'll talk about that on the side, but I'm not a home brewer, so I didn't have that, you know what I mean? I didn't know who you were. So the fact that I met you on such an off limb kind of thing, and then everybody I talk to, like especially my home brewer friends, when I tell the story, they're like, no way, that is amazing. And it's funny because like, it seemed like they all wanted to have that experience where they just randomly meet you. And I was just like, I just stumbled in because my hotel room was too down and I just didn't want to like go to bed. You ever have one of those nights where you're like, man, I need another beer? That was that night.
Yeah. Well,
so it was awesome. So after that, I started, talking to you online and all that. But like, it was funny. I didn't realize the empire that you were building and B still have back then. So I don't know if you want to comment on how we met and all that. It was pretty funny.
Oh, dude. I mean, first off, that's I love that story in part because it shows a couple of things about me. And one of the main ones is that everyone's welcome, and for better or for worse, right? So this is the kind of stuff that gets me into trouble with my wife and with some other organizations, is we just love to have a great time. And so when you showed up, I vaguely remember this whole situation, by the way. It's that I think beer was definitely a part of the festivities on that day. But I've heard the stories of myself standing and giving this very sentimental speech. And that is definitely just kind of my character. I like to have fun like that. And again, I was glad you showed up, because you and I have been talking since then. And here I am on your cool little video cast thing here to answer questions. But yeah, great time, man. It was awesome to meet you then.
Yeah, man. And I always say I meet the best people at bars and at conventions, and this is a continuing one. But sometimes the most random and crazy things happen for a reason, for whatever reason, and that was just one of them for me. That is the story that I take back from that time. So again, it's just funny. I was like, I didn't even realize who I was with, so it was great.
Yeah, likewise.
Yeah, it was good shit. So let's start at the beginning, man, because I don't know, and I don't know much of your story, and I want to, because I know the end of the story, or at least this current segment. But so where did you find craft beer? Where was that? Let's start at the craft beer, because obviously your life. So where'd that go? Where'd that start?
Yeah, that's it goes way back to 2002, I believe. I turned 21 in March of 2002, and I was living up in Bellingham, Washington, and up there was one brew pub. It was called Boundary Bay Brewery. They're still around. Now you go to Bellingham, and they've got some of the best beer, I think, on earth, with Chuckanut and Aslan and Coolshin and all those great places now. But back when I lived there with who's now my wife, there was just Boundary Bay. And so when I turned 21, it was sort of this rite of passage for, Western Washington University students to go hang out down at Boundary Bay. And so we do it all the time, multiple times a weekend. We'd be, just kicking it at Boundary Bay Brewing. And that was kind of my introduction to craft beer. It wasn't very far after that. In fact, less than a year after I turned 21, I was working at a group home. I'm a psychologist in my real life. And at the time I was in undergrad, studying psychology, and I had this side job at this group home, and usually they'd have 2 people on per shift, and it was a 24-hour residential home for 4 autistic boys. And I showed up real early in the morning for the first shift of the day, and my partner wasn't there yet. He was like 15-20 minutes behind, so I handled it, no big deal. And when he showed up, his excuse was that he got behind because he was bottling his own beer. And I was like, what? We've all seen that. If I know you don't brew, but any brewer, when you first at least back in the day, when you would let somebody know that you make your own beer, they thought you were a little kooky, which they're not wrong. But so he told me this whole story, and I just was fascinated by it. I loved beer. And by the end of our shift, he had convinced me to go down to the homebrew shop in Bellingham and pick up a kit. And that's exactly what I did. And my roommate and I at the time threw together our first batch. And so it goes. I mean, here we are today. The only time I took a brief hiatus was during graduate school. In 2004, I got married and moved down to California from Washington State. And just couldn't brew as often because graduate school. But as soon as that was over with, boom, jumped right back in. And Brülosophy got started kind of as a way for me to stay in the hobby after a really close friend of mine moved away from town. He and I used to brew together all the time, and I wanted something to keep me busy. And Brülosophy was it. We started experimenting with beer. And I guess our bread and butter is our experiment series, where we basically sensory analysis. So what we'll usually do is brew two batches of the same exact beer, and manipulate one variable in one of the batches, and then have people perform a triangle test. So they'll take 3 of the same beers and try to select 2 will be from one keg, and then the other one will be from another keg. And we have them try to determine which one is different. They don't know what the variable is or anything like that. And then we've got a whole bunch of other series as well. We do a real hop focus series where we brew a single hop beer and have people blindly evaluate that. We have one that's getting kind of popular right now called Short and Shoddy, where we brew a beer using shoddier brewing methods and see if it doesn't work. It's been working pretty well. But yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
Awesome. So this is a question that someone shot me a message to ask you. Did Brülosophy come from you hearing bullshit in the whole homebrew area, and you just wanted to debunk it? Because it gives that the website kind of gives that feel of, especially when you jump in, like there's a proof, like we're trying to go against things that people like think are common but are not.
Yeah. So it's funny. I've been asked this before, and it couldn't be our impetus for starting Brülosophy couldn't be more opposite than that. My whole intent when I first started experimenting, I wanted to experience for myself what doing these wrong techniques would do. I wanted to see what, how, if you mashed it 165 degrees compared to 148, I wanted to see what the difference was so that I could be more, I guess, intelligent when I was talking about it with other people, and just kind of personally know what it would lead to. What we ended up finding was that a lot of these things don't seem to have a perceptible impact, or at least to the degree that we all expect and we've all talked about. And so I totally get why it looks like that. That our whole goal is to debunk the traditional perspectives, but really that is not our intention at all. And more than anybody else, despite what you might read in the forums or somebody says over at homebrewtalk.com, we don't care if you change your mind or change your ways or whatever. We're just doing this because it's interesting for us, and we're glad it seems like a lot of people enjoy it. But if you're going to take a single data point that we produce and you're going to use that to completely adapt, the way that you're making beer, I don't care if you do that, but you can't blame us if you screw something up, because we're not saying to do that. That's not the product we're selling. So
right. And sometimes you do things that you have I don't even know if unintended consequences is it, but sometimes the result is things that you didn't foresee. So when some people perceive you as being that way, you're like, hey man, that's not the way it was. But if you want to perceive, I love saying you're entitled to your perception. So
totally couldn't agree more. Yeah.
Right. So another thing that struck me, and another thing that I was kind of like not taken aback, but your website impressed me was the mix of science and homebrewing. And obviously there are two things that go home and home, hand in hand. You can't even separate them. But you guys really take it to another level. And I'm as a science head and as a person who loves science, the bridge between the two is just fantastic. I don't know if you want to talk about that, because I didn't hear a scientific background on you, or am I wrong?
Well, I've got a PhD in psychology. Now that is a soft science, as it were. But if you look at what Brülosophy is all about, for the most part, it's the sensory side of things. It's perception, which is to me far more psychological than it is, this objective hard science. And there's no way that my fascination with the subjective aspect of being human didn't also contribute to my interest in this beer thing, and why our focus is generally on the sensory and the perceptive. To me, that's what's interesting. It also feels more practical. So we'll get a lot of people saying, these guys, 20 people couldn't tell a difference between these beers on a statistically significant level, but you should have sent them into a lab because that'd really tell us. Well, what if the lab said that they were still different and people couldn't taste it? I mean, I'm way more interested personally in the fact that people could or could not perceive a difference, based on this variable. So, but I wrote a dissertation. I've had to do, multiple science projects and such. I've studied science. I've studied stats far too long. It's not something I absolutely love, but I love the experimental side of things. And so, to say that didn't influence me, would be false, because I know for a fact that it did. I just find the person side of science far more interesting than the data side, the number side.
Yeah, me too. It's fascinating. Seltzers fascinates me. I know it frustrates some people, but it just fascinates me because, again, people are making these choices between beer and seltzer, and that's a perception thing. You know what I mean? I find it fascinating. I'm not a big fan of seltzers, but I find the whole trend and the way people are doing it fascinating, as opposed to, and that's just, again, about perception and what people are drinking and all that. I don't know if you have I mentioned seltzers, and I know it's a hot rod conversation or a hot, it's a hot conversation. So I don't know if you want to comment on seltzers while we're here.
Dude, I will drink the hell out of some White Claw. I don't give a shit what people think.
Okay.
And this is where we get into the more philosophical piece of it is what in the world would drive another person to care at all what somebody else enjoys drinking? I just don't get that mentality, right? And I've been in this for a long ass time. The whole hazy IPA thing, I may not be a huge fan. But nowadays, because of all of the weird schmucks out there who blast on others who enjoy that style, if I say I don't like it, now all of a sudden I'm a hater. But I'm not. I don't care if you want to drink them. I brew them for my friends. I couldn't give two shits. But it's the same with seltzer. And to me, seltzer is just another, it's another blip along that line of, not beer, not traditional, not normal. And so it's just another thing to scapegoat basically people for. Oh, you like seltzer? You're ruining craft. No, I have a seltzer on tap in my Keezer right now. And it's a very easy. I just put mixed vodka, water, and some flavoring, and that's it. But it's good. And if people enjoy it, then by all means. I don't know wwhy you would try to talk somebody out of not liking something. So that's my take.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. I feel that totally. And the thing that now it's milkshake IPAs. Now it's
right. Yeah. Lactose laden. Yeah.
right. And for the record, I love them. Come at me on Twitter. Come at me where you want. I love them actually.
Yeah. No, you should love them. Who cares if you? I've got a local bud, Brad Gaines, who's starting a brewery here in town, and I do not like most beers with lactose in it. So even milk stout, it's just not my thing really. But this guy makes these crazy good concoctions that if you're gonna not like it because of principle, well, that's your fault. Try to open your mind a little bit and just not be such a jerk. Is how I look at it.
Right. Well, and that's I think what people miss too in all this is that this is the beauty of beer, is that it's so vast that we could sit here and argue whether a lambic is better than a milkshake IPA. Of course, a lambic's better, but that's another story for another. You know what I mean? The fact that we have these debates and the fact that we're able to argue. I argue with one of my good friends online, porters. She calls them brown water porters, and I'm like, you know what? That's fine because that's what I want out of a porter. So now what? Like, I want a porter to be, a little bit of a, a light drinker, a little bit of a, you know what I mean? Like a little bit of a watery stout. Like if I want a big stout, I can go get a big stout, but I want a porter. I want a little bit of roast. I want an easy drinking. What's the problem here? So there is no problem because again, I can get my porter, Marshall, and at the same place, you could probably get your hazy IPA that you don't want.
Exactly.
And we can all be happy.
But you know what you can't get because everyone hates it is that ice cold Miller Lite. That's the thing, and that's my thing as well. Is I'll sit around and I'll drink through, knock a few cold ones back with my neighborhood, and people just get up in arms about the fact that I would support evil big beer. I'm not. I just want to enjoy life. My goodness.
Yeah.
It's the same reason you came to my hotel room.
Right. And it's funny too because when I go places and there's free beer and it's usually mainstream beer, I literally take a picture and I'm like, I'm about to troll my group. Because once I put it in there, they're going to be like, what?
It's not even intentional. Yeah, it's not even like I'm just enjoying this beer over here.
It's like, oh my goodness. So, so let's get back to Brlosophy here. One of the things that I knew when I knew that my friend Marshall hit, or when I knew that you were like big, is when I heard you on Beersmith. And and I was like, man, my boys hit it. I forget when that was, but like I probably found it after you're probably on after I met you. I'm not sure. My point is that you definitely didn't see Brülosophy getting this big when you started it, did you?
It was never so. My wife accuses me of being very a go-getter, and I don't say no to myself. If I see something that looks fun or interesting, I just kind of go for it. With Brülosophy, it was funny because it almost feels like, this was before Kickstarter and Patreon and all that stuff, but it was very much was driven by the crowd of people who liked what I was doing. The only reason the website got started and we kicked things off in, I believe it was February of 2014, was because I was posting these experiment results to homebrew forums on Reddit and Homebrew Talk and all of this. And people were saying, man, it'd be really nice if you had a website to catalog all of your experiments. So, okay, fine, I'll do that. So I set up a website. which I've never done before. And then from there, people, the stats started to grow. And I remember when we hit in 1 week, we had like 1,000 page views in 1 week, and it blew my mind. And I had friends who tried starting websites saying, you got to, roll with this. And so we went from there, and it grew and it grew. And then we're getting, 2 million views in a year and all of this crazy stuff. And people were saying, man, it would be really great if you had a podcast. And I'm like, well, okay, let's see what we can do with that. And we start the podcast, and the stats continue to, flow in, and podcast is doing amazing. So just shocked me. So it wasn't intended, though. My wife tells me to give, she says, you got to, personality and your willingness to do this kind of crazy stuff did contribute to its growth, I suppose. So that's, I guess that's the credit I'll take. But yeah, it's been a crazy ride because of the fact that it wasn't like this. I didn't have a business plan or anything like that. And here we are basically running a business. And so yeah, wild time, I tell you.
Right. So then so let's start kind of moving all over the place here. But so when Brülosophy started, because now Brülosophy is a team. In fact, when I met you, it was a team. So it's been a team since it's been on my radar. So is that how it started? And that's how, obviously that's how it is now. Yeah. And that's how you're able to sustain, I'm sure, all the things that you do, because I have a little old stum little brand that's been around for 5 years. Holla, happy anniversary. Holla. But I don't, and I don't ever see myself being as big as you, but if I ever was, I would need a team. So I don't know if you want to talk about how the team started and how you built, because that's something that I always know that you like to talk about, because you're like, hey, this isn't all me, man.
No. This is barely me. I do a lot of the behind the scenes stuff at this point, and that which has taken a lot of learning. I've had to teach myself how to do these things. But if it weren't for the crew members who who are on board, who've been on board, we've had some have to take a break and back away. But it all started actually pretty soon after the website. I got contacted by this guy named Greg Foster, who lives in Southern California. And he was saying, hey, man, what are the odds? I was just planning on doing stuff exactly like what you're doing. And just wanted to let you know. And I said, well, why don't you do it? And we'll just publish it on the website. We've already got this kind of built-in audience at this point. And then soon after that, Ray Found came on board, and then Malcolm Fraser and Jake Houlihan and Matt Del Fiacco, and all the names that you'll hear, Cade Job and Phil Rusher and Brian Hall, all these names that you'll hear on the podcast now, or whose names you'll see on the website. And it dead serious. There's no way we'd be able to sustain without those guys. And it's cool because it's created this, in a sense, this family, and we bicker just like siblings do. And we, but I would have it no other way. And we've got this, no butthurt rule is kind of this thing that we all abide by. So you can say whatever you want. You can be as inflammatory as you want, but you can't get butthurt by it. If you do, call the other person out or whatever, but let's all stay cool. And that's just how it's been for the last 6 years. And, we've added a few new folks. Recently we added Andy Carter, who's also in Southern California, Greg Foster, Jason Cipriani. They've had to take a step back because of family issues and such. But yeah, it's really neat. We got this team, and we try to travel together, and we do things. None of us live in the same city. So everything that we do and that you hear on the podcast is all done over Zoom nowadays, and we've just kind of figured out ways to make it work.
Yeah, and it's great because I'm really it was cool that I started with the way we met, because the way we met, again, shows how the Brülosophy thing was structured, actually, which is, again, it's a family, it's a community. Again, that's what I walked into. It was great, and that's what I walked into, and that's what I walked out of, and that's what, again, it was just like it was just kind of surreal for me, especially in the end, looking back and not knowing who you are in the community that you did, and then coming home and being like, whoa, that was pretty cool. What were you doing? Right?
It's still, I'll tell you, man. And that phenomenon is still a shock to me. I'm still just a normal part of the brewing community. That's how I view it. But to go places and for people to recognize my voice, that's a common one. I was in 4 years ago now, I was in New Zealand with Gordon Strong and Mike Tonsmeyer from the Mad Fermentationist. Gordon Strong, of course, Grandmaster, BJCP judge, great guy. And but my wife and I had gone out to breakfast at this small little place on this little campground. I don't even know how we got there. And we're just kind of talking quietly, and this New Zealand guy comes up and he's like, "Hey, your voice sounds very familiar." And I said, "Okay, thanks, man." And Brülosophy Podcast, right? I was, oh, geez. So to be, and I'm sure this guy was at the festival that we were there for, the conference we were there for, but it's just such an odd experience. I was in New Zealand. I know, it was so weird. And that's the thing is I think that it's easy to let that go to your head because it does feel kind of good. I mean, I'm not going to, it's weird. I never would have expected I'd be in this position, but it is kind of cool. And we definitely, all of us at Brülosophy definitely embrace that. And everybody's welcome. We'll usually at conferences that we're invited to go to, we'll usually have a big group of people who just kind of, we're like Velcro and they stick to us, and we'll go drink together and have a great time. And, just be really inclusive. It's our goal.
Man. And I feel you. I feel that way when I'm around Madison and people are like, "Hey, are you Daddy Porter?" And I'm like, "Yeah, oh yeah, sorry. Hi, how you doing?" It's just a weird thing. Like, it's just really a weird thing. And I'm like, I'm not even close to your range, bro. So like for me, it's even like, wow, it's cool. But there's that initial moment that you're like, whoa, what's going on here? So
yeah.
So coming forward. So you guys, again, Brülosophy is a family. It's easy to kind of get caught up when you get to your website and you just get into the experiments and you're like, boom. But as you guys have grown, I've seen you guys you get that feel that it's definitely a community and a bunch of people contributing, because you see the different articles, and then people bring different perspectives to that whole thing. So that's great. And then you guys went so now we have a podcast, which is you said jumping off for sure. How long have we been doing that?
The podcast we started, we actually started it right before I went on this New Zealand trip. It was we dropped our first introductory episode. I believe it was March of 2017, and for the first year, we were publishing an episode every other week. And the response was, I'll tell you, it knocked my socks off just how much people wanted. I didn't realize how much people wanted to listen to me talk with the guys. I mean, it just blows my mind. And so about a year after we started the whole thing, we moved it to a weekly podcast. We've had to take on sponsors. So there's no way we would be able to do this stuff if it weren't compensated. And people hate to hear that, but it's just the truth. And so we've got sponsors, and then we've got Patreon, a Patreon setup where people get cool rewards for supporting the show, and it's just this thing now, and it's a normal part of my life. So it no longer feels as much like a side task as it does just this thing that I do on a weekend morning, and we knock it out, and I'm loving it. I'm so glad that I didn't resist doing that, because we got so many recommendations to start it. And I was hesitant with running we're publishing 2 articles every week, which anyone who's ever run a blog or a website before, with a group of 6 people, that is no small task. And on top of that, they're not just fluffy articles. They are data driven. You're brewing a beer, you're collecting data, you're reporting it in a way that it fits with our theme, basically. And it's a lot of work. And then on top of that, now we're adding in a podcast show every week. And we may, little birdie tells me we may be having some spin-off shows coming here in the near future. Cool focuses. So yeah.
All right. So this is a simple question for me. I don't know if it's simple for you to ask. How has COVID changed things?
Yeah, a lot for us, right? That's a good question. First off, fuck COVID, right?
Yeah. Actually, I have something to even commemorate that. Let's do this. Yeah, here we go. I don't know if you see that.
I don't. I think I got a little lag here.
Fuck COVID.
There we go. That's awesome.
And hoarders, by the way, it says here too. Fuck COVID and hoarding. But this is local brewery, Ale Asylum.
That is awesome.
Yeah. All goes to charity, all that. So yes. So now, yes, fuck COVID. But going with your story, brother.
Yeah, I love it. So COVID, the biggest impact that it's had on us is that we can't go out and collect data. For all but 1 or 2 of the series that we do, we collect data from blind tasters, and usually we do that at homebrew club meetings or at local pubs that allow us to come in and do our thing. Well, we haven't been able to do that for almost 3 months now. In fact, I was at my local House of Pendragon Brewing Company the day and I was with the owner. We were having some beers the day that the governor called the quarantine and for all businesses to close down. So, it's been a weird experience, and we've had to shift the way that we do our data collection over the past, 2.5 months now. All of the experiments that we do, rather than collecting data from others, we do a series of triangle tests ourselves. We've been trying to focus on going back and redoing experiments that we thought were interesting, so that we're not testing new stuff out using this less than, I guess, rigorous a model, statistical model or data collection model. And so it's been working out. I mean, people still seem to enjoy the content. But until this thing passes, we're not going to be able to do what we're really known for doing, which is get that blind data from tasters.
Yeah, but I don't know. I say this with a little bit of caution. I think the end is near, maybe. Not sure.
It's coming. I mean, here in California, at the very least, we're starting to see things loosen up a bit. And obviously, people are going to have to be cautious and go out there and do what you need to do. Our Pendragon, again, it's a block away from my place, and I'm good friends with the owners. They last Friday was their first opening, and so of course I had to go support my homies there, and it was great. They had way less people could come in, and they had a limit, but you got your table. You couldn't leave your group. You had to wear a mask if you weren't drinking, which everyone was drinking, and you had to order food. So they got in like a pizza oven, to make pizza for folks. But it worked really well, and I think people were excited to get back to normal.
Yeah. So that I'm kind of hearing that once COVID comes back, we can expect actually, I'm saying these words, you can correct me, a more robust Brülosophy. I'm hearing.
Well, it'll feel more robust. Our goal when COVID is done is just to get back to normal first, because we want to, it's going to take a minute. We had everything set up. You got to imagine when you got 6 guys who are all contributing to the same thing. And so we had a backlog. If we publish something, we publish every Monday and every Thursday. So if we publish an experiment on Monday, we had 2 or 3 or 4 experiments right behind it that were ready to go, so that we could edit and get those ready. And we had this whole backlog. Well, now we don't have any of that. We've published all of the ones with that data, the blind taster data. And now all we've got are these experiments that we've done our own data collection on. So we're going to have to, there's going to be probably like a 1-month buffer where we're rebuilding up that cache,
Right.
But it'll be good. I trust it'll be great once we come back to normal.
Right. And I'm not sure how much. Well, I guess a lot of people are doing a lot of home brewing, but I'm also hearing a lot of people. I've heard that beer consumption's up, beer to go is up. Obviously, we're not talking about stuff like that.
Well, I'll tell you what, there is a very, very well-known trend that in recessions, DIY hobbies such as home brewing do a lot better. And based on what we're seeing on our stats, and I've got a lot of friends in the beer and brewing industry, home brewing and professional, what we're seeing are a lot of interest, a lot of in interest. We've got we're lucky because I feel like we caught the tail end of the last home brewing wave. And so we've never seen a decline. We keep seeing growth in readership at the site and listenership on the podcast. But I'll tell you, over the last 2 months, that spike has increased. That rise is a bit more steep right now. And my hope is that the people who are checking it out and trying homebrewing for the first time love it enough to stay with it, because it's a badass hobby. I mean, in what other hobby do you get to make your own alcohol and share that with friends, impress your family, and have any, you have the whole palette of flavors to create on your own. And so I just hope these people stick around, and that that's a part. This sounds a little bit aspirational, but a part of what I hope to present with Brülosophy is the opposite of what a lot of the homebrewing world has been, which is, it's this tough thing and I'm able to do it, and that makes me special. Our goal is to say, no, it's not hard at all. Brewing beer takes a little bit of time, but if you have that time and you know how to wash your hands, basically, you can make a batch of beer and you'll enjoy it. And so that's and we get a lot of shit for that. A lot of people want to gatekeep and to keep the sacred thing that, there's German ways or whatever it is. And that's great. If that's what tickles your fancy, by all means. but we want to welcome people in. Again, inclusivity. We want people here. We want people to feel like this is a cool thing that they can be a part of without being judged by a bunch of hoity-toity people. So,
amen, brother.
amen, brother.
Amen. So I only have a few more questions for you here. My next question is are you involved in homebrew VirtualCon?
I will not be involved in that. I'll be honest with you. I barely just learned about that, and the amount of other stuff that I've booked, like this today, and I was recently just on. You mentioned Brlosophy Podcast. We got another episode of that coming out soon that I was a guest on. We're doing our own thing, and I've been multiple homebrew club meetings. So it's just too much going on for me, and I had to pick and choose. And there are things that take priority, I suppose. But I do think it sounds like a really interesting event, and I'll be interested to hear from people who do participate how it goes down.
And obviously, you're a fan and all that, so it's not even about that. How can so obviously, we got big projects, we got stuff going on. Can you just name a few things that people can do besides just straight up sending you cash to support Brülosophy? I mean, obviously we need cash. That's number one. And everybody knows that. But, in a time of COVID where, everybody's kind of, everybody should be clenching their wallets, and, gas prices are going up and food prices are going up.
Yeah.
How can I, or how can somebody who appreciates what you guys do help support? I'm going to bring up your website while I'm doing this.
yeah, Brülosophy.com. Honestly, the easiest way to support, I think, anyone in this industry is to frequent the website, listen to the podcast, leave reviews. If you're, I mean, it sounds cheesy, but if you have Apple iTunes, or if you have Google Podcasts, whatever, and you go and you leave a review, the more reviews and the more ratings a show has, the higher up their rank, their SEO, search engine optimization improves because of that stuff. And then right here, what you're showing right now, use those links. I'm sure you've got some as well. I don't want to steal your support.
No.
But by using those links, we get like 6% commission anytime you use links. And that is one of the biggest ways we get supported, through Amazon and Adventures in Homebrewing and More Beer, Great Fermentations. And those companies want to support us. They want to give us that cut because it means that we've got this relationship, and it's kind of this symbiotic thing where we're all in it together. And so, but those are probably the easiest ways. You won't feel a single thing by using these links. We do have a Patreon. You can go check that out if you are a brewer, especially. Our most popular Patreon is that $5 a month one, where you get, in addition to, a monthly, recipe that we've never released, and participation in this badass Q&A thing with somebody cool in the brewing world, you get a discount at YakimaValleyHops.com that is always more than the $5 that you're pledging to support us. So this month, I heard from one person who saved $28 on hops for a $5 pledge per month. So it's pretty cool. But honestly, listen to the show, read the website. That's how we're going to get the most support, I think.
Amen. So I have a question for you. I don't know can you see it on the screen here?
I sure can.
Does Marshall listen to any other beer or homebrew podcasts?
You better believe I do. Now here's the thing. I used to have far more time than I do now, so I have kind of a backlog. But do you want to know which ones I listen to regularly?
Joseph is asking, so I guess.
Yeah, I love James Spencer from Basic Brewing Radio is a good friend of mine, and I've been on his show well before we had a podcast. And just I think somebody who really spurred along the experimental side of homebrewing with his experiments, and just an awesome, I think, really nice, well done podcast that's fun to listen to. And he and Steve are hilarious. So that's one of them. Another one that I obviously I think I really enjoy is Brlosophy Podcast, and Brad has some of the coolest guests on, and who just share a lot of detailed information. For those who may not be familiar with Brad Smith and Brlosophy, he created what is the most popular brewing software. So brewing recipe design software, has a podcast to go along with that, which is fantastic. All of the shows from the Brewing Network are a lot of fun, a little bit more college humor, which I think, that sense of levity is kind of nice in this world. And yeah, those are some of my favorites. I do also listen to a lot of other types of podcasts. I'm into, I like true crime. So I listen to a bunch of true crime podcasts to kind of break this, monotony of brewing. But yeah, podcasts are the way of the future, man. I love them.
Oh, I love them too. And it's good to hear that a podcast. I've heard some podcasters say, I don't listen to any others. And I'm like, how do you do that? Like, it's almost like, how do you, I can't understand that, because how do you do that? Because to me, looking at other people's streams is how I get my ideas, and looking at other people's, work is how I get my inspiration. So
Yeah,
it's kind of hard. It's kind of weird to hear that, but it doesn't surprise me that you're a podcast head. So,
well, I'll tell you what, I like how you said, you listen to these other podcasts to get ideas. For me, I feel like our show, the Brülosophy Podcast, it kind of filled this little gap that I felt was missing. You had Basic Brewing, which would have guests call in and talk about experiments that they were doing with the show hosts. Fantastic format. You had, the Session by the Brewing Network, which was a bunch of dudes sitting around microphones and having a good time. I've been on that show a few times as well. Ton of fun, just shooting the shit about beer and brewing in general. You got Beersmith, which was, technical, very technical and specific based on the guest. And I felt like the Brülosophy Podcast kind of filled in this niche of digging deep into a specific variable and, experimenting with it and talking about the sensory side of it. And so that was the way I was inspired by these other shows that I absolutely love, is that it was, there's room for us to squeeze in here,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So Marshall, it's been fantastic. Actually, I want to, my friend Dwayne says this was awesome. My friend Tiffany says hello.
Hey, Tiffany.
Yeah, but so I wanted to, I don't know. I think I pretty much covered everything. Is there something that I missed about Brülosophy that you want to talk about?
I don't think so, man. You did cover a lot. I wasn't expecting to talk about, and I'm glad you did.
Well, excellent, man. Thanks for coming on and spreading the love here and introducing yourself to my peeps. It's weird for me to think that there are homebrewers that don't know about you. So it really is, actually. I'm like, you don't know about Brülosophy? And they're like, what? And I'm like, come on now. No, but
it's weird, man.
No, but this is funny because, again, you're big on my radar. Doesn't mean that everybody else has the same radar as you already know.
Right.
But so I just wanted to thank you for coming on, and I love to have you back in a year or so, and we'll see where we're at as far as post-COVID and what you guys have planned. I mean, again, you guys feel like if I miss 6 months, I'm missing, like, you know what I mean, like some advancement. Yeah. So you guys are really good at keeping it clean and keeping it new. And so I just wanted to thank you, and yeah.
Hey, dude, I appreciate you having me on this. It was a lot of fun, and you're always inclusivity, man. Let's just be cool with homebrewing, and you're in general, and appreciate that other people appreciate things you may not. And I think that's the coolest thing that you guys are doing, and you keep on keeping on because you're kicking ass over there too, man. So
thanks, Marshall. It's been fantastic, and again, fuck COVID, and keep your family safe, and keep family and friends, all those people, everybody stay safe, and I will talk to you soon-ish.
Yeah, brother.
Cheers, Marshall. Man, yeah, that was a good one. It's great that Marshall came on. I'm finding that people are more doing this. People are way more receptive of me and of being on the show and showing you guys what they're doing. I like that Marshall's I guess he said he's Southern California, so he's 9:45 there. And I'm having my second beer at almost noon here. Hurricane's about to come through, or a tropical storm, so we're about to get a whole bunch of rain. But I hope you guys loved it. I'm looking at the number of people here watching, and this is the most we've had for a long time. I'm talking about 11 o'clock in the morning Central Time, but obviously that's what Marshall brings and Brülosophy brings, and they're a great brand. So if you guys don't know about them, a home brewer that's looking for some new content, right down there, hit up Brülosophy. So this week we have Brothers in Booze with Afro Beer Chick and Aaron Gouveia. I'm going to post the last time that Aaron Gouveia was on the show, and Afro Beer Chick was comment bombing during the show. So, and they were going back and forth. So we're like, hey, why don't you guys both come on? So they're both going to come on, and we're going to hit a wide range of topics about why they both went viral and all the different things that they get into online. And it's just going to be a good time. Probably go about an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours. But it's going to be damn good. It's going to be fun. Doug will be back tomorrow. I'm talking to Georgia's beer wench, Carrie Allen. She's going to talk. We're going to talk Georgia beer. We're going to talk about her favorite beer things, how we met, and we're going to dive in a little bit. That is tomorrow at 5 Eastern, 4 Central. So I'll see you guys then. What's that? What did I say? 5 Eastern, 4 Central. Yes. So it's time for lunch. Thanks for being involved in our conversation, and thanks for commenting. And you can check all these out on my YouTube page, YouTube/Daddy Porter, or they will reside in a beer group, Daddy Porter's Beer Group, or Facebook page, Daddy Porter. Thank you. Cheers.